So that was Chloe with the technical analysis, and now we're going to do a little bit of fundamental stuff, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening over on the US side. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen, and we'll take a look at. Let's see. Okay, there are a couple of interesting. Okay, first up, we have quite a couple of stuff that's been happening in the world. Before I go to this headlines, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the US dollar. So there's everything ever since the the war, right? There are a lot of talks about whether the US dollar status as the leading global reserve is still in place. So currently, the US dollar still makes up a majority of foreign exchange reserves, and it does kind of dominate trade invoicing. So US treasuries are traditionally a very safe asset of choice for global markets because the country's institutions are, people still do trust, the US's institutions in that sense, But if threats to the dollar do emerge, they are unlikely to come from outside central banks, right? So I don't think the major central banks will want to diversify a lot of their reserves away from the US dollars, maybe some, because technology has been making it possible for direct transfers between smaller currencies. So in that kind of way, it kind of removed the US dollar to act as a gatekeeper. But other than the slight diversification, the swap lines between central banks and the Fed, do make the US still, if the need arises, it is a currency for a very smooth flight to safety, right? So a bigger threat a lot of currencies is feeling now that, is the brunt of the Western sanctions that has been happening in Russia. They might look to avoid transacting in and out of the US dollar. So there are a bunch of currencies that don't quite trust the US dollar in the same way as, the other probably half of the world. And of course, the US has recently shown a very strong willingness to use the status of the dollar as an economic weapon, right? The most direct alternative, would then come with, people would be thinking, should we route the funds through China? So Beijing's digital currency program, it's kind of really progressing really fast, and it might be possible to shut out the dollar markets, but it is still kind of questionable of whether China would so-called take over as the currency of choice, because it is still unwilling to loosen its control over offshore renminbi trading, right? So that is quite a big barrier, to actually compete head-to-head with the US dollar. However, the US cannot afford to be complacent. So the Fed has been a bit slow to pick up on the innovations in the digital currency space, but this could prove a little bit costly, as other countries like China, and China, Russia, Japan are looking to gain a first mover advantage, right? So control over the global currency reserve is pretty sought after, but currently there is a steady demand for US dollars, just because, there is no clear game changer in the market yet, right? So at present, there are no ready currencies that can directly compete with the foundation that the US dollar has made. But in the meantime, we should keep an eye open and we'll see where it goes. So on the back of that, we're talking about the US, moving forward, increasing interest rates, quite aggressively to combat its inflation. So I will still be looking for more US dollar upside. It's a question of now finding the entries on the retracement. On the opposite of the ocean, we have the Euros, the French election coming up. So Le Pen is Macron's competitor, and she has been kind of moving up in the polls. So she's catching up with Macron, and she does have. So this is the interest. This is the sentence that I'm actually going to focus on. Le Pen's election manifesto no longer includes dropping the euro as it did back in 2017, but she still remains skeptical about free trade and open borders. So this is kind of like a hint. If Le Pen does win the election over Macron, I think the euro will kind of stay low, because, she is a little bit more nationalistic. She don't really want to open, the borders in that sense. But if Macron can take over, I would expect a little bit more upside to the euro. So this will take time to play out, which means I think for the next week or so, until the elections results comes out a bit clearer, I think the euro is going to go sideways for a bit until there is a steady, clear sign on the euro front. All right. On that front, I think what I will be looking at next week is the Aussie pairs. The Aussie pairs has been showing very strong statistical numbers. So if we look at tradingeconomics.com, the Aussie has a 4% jobless rate, 3.5% inflation rate. So what the Aussie has shown is that without increasing interest rates, it has kind of still decent inflation numbers. It still is keeping its jobless rate under control. So it hasn't quite used its weapon, or I won't say weapon, but its tool of interest rate yet, right? It hasn't really needed to up its interest rate yet because it is still kind of controlling the play. So this is what, a part of it, that's what's keeping the Aussie quite strong or valuable in that sense. But again, a lot of the Aussie pairs, if we scroll through, you can see they're a little bit overextended. So I would still look to long the Aussie, but of course, being a little bit cautious and finding those retracements to the entries. All right. So I'm a bit more bullish the Aussie. I'm bullish slightly bullish the US. I'm a bit more neutral on the euro. And I think the last pair I will be looking at is a bit of softness in the pound. So the pound, the statistics aren't really good, but it has been going sideways for a couple of the currency pairs. So what I'm looking for is those retracement legs to short the pound. So I think my focus next week will be on the pound Aussie and maybe the pound dollar, looking for the short side. So hopefully that kind of turns up for me next week. Pound Aussie has been going sideways for a bit. We'll see whether it gives us a bit of leeway. But this is the hourly time frame. So let me go to the pound Aussie. Yeah, pound Aussie has retraced a bit last week, in fact. So I'm looking for a little bit more short side next week. Hopefully that comes back to me. Pound dollar has kind of hit a support level. So I will be looking for a bit more retracement before looking for a bit more short side. So those are the two pairs for me. And I will pass over to Lloyd, who I think will go through